There is a reason your attention was pulled here on May 6th, and deep down you already feel that this moment carries more weight than an ordinary day. Something invisible has been moving quietly through your reality for longer than you realize, arranging conversations, emotions, delays, realizations, and encounters with an almost impossible level of precision. Your mind may try to reduce it to coincidence, but your inner world recognizes that something much larger has been unfolding beneath the surface all along. Over the last several days, you may have sensed an unusual pressure building inside yourself, not loud enough to explain to others, yet impossible to ignore once you were alone with your own thoughts. It may have felt like restlessness, emotional heaviness, heightened intuition, or the strange feeling that your life was standing on the edge of a turning point even if nothing external appeared to change. This is not paranoia, and it is not your imagination creating stories where none exist. This is the beginning of energetic realignment, the moment where your personal reality starts shifting away from the identity you have outgrown and begins responding to the person you are slowly becoming. Pluto retrograde is not merely another astrological transit passing through the sky without consequence. It operates like an internal awakening force, reaching into the hidden layers of your subconscious and activating truths that have remained buried beneath survival patterns, distractions, and emotional conditioning for years. And before moving deeper into this message, if you already feel something inside you responding emotionally, spiritually, or intuitively, take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and comment, "I am ready." Because this message was never meant to be passive information. It is an activation, a threshold, an invitation into a completely different level of awareness. The fact that you are hearing these words right now, at this exact stage of your life, is not random. Something inside you has already started opening. Part of your spirit has already recognized the shift before your conscious mind could fully understand it. Recently, even ordinary moments may have begun to feel different in ways that are difficult to explain. Your external life may still look familiar to everyone around you. The same routines may continue. The same responsibilities may exist. The same people may still occupy your environment. Yet internally, something profound has been changing beneath the visible surface. You may have noticed yourself reflecting more deeply than usual, revisiting old memories, questioning beliefs you once accepted automatically, or recognizing emotional patterns in relationships that you previously ignored. There is a growing sensitivity within you now, a heightened connection to truth that makes unconscious living feel impossible to tolerate any longer. Pluto retrograde works beneath appearances, not through dramatic surface-level performances, but through deep psychological exposure. It slowly lifts hidden realities into conscious awareness until you can no longer pretend not to see them. Its purpose is not destruction without meaning. Its purpose is revelation. It exposes what has remained hidden, so clarity can finally replace illusion. That is why this energy can make you feel emotionally divided at times, steady yet uneasy, peaceful yet emotionally intense, certain yet uncertain all at once. These contradictions are not signs that you are failing or losing direction. They are evidence that your perception is expanding beyond the comfort of old illusions. What is collapsing is not your life. What is collapsing is the false narrative surrounding it. The illusion is dissolving, so you can finally distinguish what is authentic from what merely felt familiar. Certain moments arrive in life when the boundary between truth and illusion becomes thin enough for hidden realities to finally break through into awareness. And this is one of those rare periods. An energetic gateway has opened through Pluto retrograde, a truth portal that cannot necessarily be seen with the physical eye, yet can be deeply felt within the emotional and spiritual body. Through this opening, suppressed emotions, avoided realizations, hidden fears, and long-denied truths begin surfacing with undeniable intensity. You may suddenly recognize the real reason something in your life unfolded the way it did. You may look at a person differently overnight. You may realize that a connection, ambition, or identity you once fought desperately to preserve no longer aligns with who you are becoming. The power of this portal lies in its permanence. Once truth fully enters your awareness, you cannot return to ignorance. You cannot unknow what your soul has already recognized. You cannot return to the older version of yourself who accepted emotional misalignment simply because it felt comfortable or familiar. This energy is not arriving to keep you emotionally asleep. It is arriving to free you from patterns, attachments, and illusions that were never truly connected to your highest path. Liberation is not always soft. Sometimes freedom begins with discomfort because clarity forces you to confront realities you once avoided. Yet what is surfacing now is not appearing to punish you. It is appearing to release you from what no longer belongs in your future. There are structures within your life that were created by an earlier version of yourself, a version shaped by fear, survival, emotional wounds, or the need for external validation. Pluto Retrograde begins exposing these outdated internal foundations with remarkable precision. These structures are not only external situations, but also identities, beliefs, emotional attachments, coping mechanisms, and definitions of self that once felt necessary yet were never designed to last forever. As this energy deepens, you may begin noticing that certain parts of your life no longer carry the same emotional certainty they once did. Situations that once felt dependable may suddenly feel fragile. Relationships you trusted without question may now reveal inconsistencies you can no longer overlook. Paths you once pursued confidently may suddenly feel disconnected from your spirit. And while this realization can feel deeply unsettling at first, it is also the beginning of one of the most important awakenings of your life. Because the moment you recognize what no longer aligns with your soul is the same moment your true transformation finally begins. What is happening now is not the destruction of your life, even though parts of it may feel unstable or unfamiliar. What is happening is far deeper than external loss. Your reality is being rearranged according to a higher level of truth, and that process can feel uncomfortable because the mind naturally resists anything that forces it to release what once felt safe. But illusions never disappear because you are weak or because you somehow failed. They disappear because your spirit has evolved beyond the version of yourself that once needed them. There comes a stage in every awakening where clarity begins entering places that were previously built on denial, distraction, or emotional survival. And once that clarity arrives, everything starts changing at once. You begin recognizing the difference between what genuinely nourishes your soul and what only kept you emotionally occupied. You begin seeing which relationships carry real alignment and which were only connected to old wounds, old loneliness, or old identities you no longer belong to. You start understanding what was truly meant for your path and what was only temporary, existing for a season of growth rather than permanence. This can create a strange emotional disorientation because part of you is still grieving the familiar, while another part of you is awakening to something far more authentic. Yet this discomfort is not meaningless. It is necessary because no one can fully enter a new reality while still clinging emotionally to what no longer belongs inside it. Pluto retrograde does not ask you to search desperately for answers in the outside world. It asks you to stop running from yourself long enough to finally listen to what your inner world has been trying to reveal all along. This phase of your journey is an inward descent, a sacred confrontation with the hidden emotional landscape that has existed beneath your daily routines, beneath your distractions, beneath the personality you learn to perform for others. Pluto retrograde opens the door to that hidden space and slowly guides you into it, not to harm you, but to reconnect you with truths that have waited patiently beneath the surface for years. Buried emotions begin rising. Fears you thought you overcame suddenly reveal deeper roots. Truths you avoided because they felt too painful or inconvenient begin demanding your attention. This is not punishment from the universe, and it is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is transformation, unfolding at the deepest level possible. Within this inner descent, you begin meeting versions of yourself that were shaped during moments of fear, rejection, disappointment, abandonment, and survival. You begin seeing how certain emotional patterns were created to protect you when you were younger, when you needed safety more than authenticity. Some parts of you learn to stay silent in order to avoid conflict. Some learn to overgive in order to feel loved. Some learn to chase validation because they never truly believed they were enough on their own. These survival identities once served a purpose, but Pluto Retrograde reveals that many of them are no longer aligned with who you are becoming now. And as you sit honestly with these hidden parts of yourself instead of rejecting them, something powerful starts happening. A separation begins to form between your authentic self and the conditioning that shaped your behavior for years. You start realizing that who you truly are is not identical to who you were trained to become. Beneath the fear, beneath the emotional armor, beneath the survival mechanisms, another version of you has been waiting quietly to emerge. This is where genuine transformation begins, not through surface-level positivity or temporary motivation, but through deep internal recognition. The further inward you are willing to travel, the more truth you uncover about your spirit, your patterns, your desires, and your purpose. And with every layer that dissolves, you become more connected to the authentic self that existed long before the world taught you who to be. As Pluto retrograde intensifies, your external reality begins reflecting your internal state with almost unsettling accuracy. The people around you, the situations you encounter, and the emotional reactions you experience begin operating like mirrors, exposing truths that may have remained hidden until now. You may notice recurring relationship dynamics suddenly becoming impossible to ignore. Certain conversations may trigger emotional reactions that seem disproportionate at first, only for you to later realize they touched wounds you had not fully healed. Situations that once felt normal may now feel emotionally exhausting because your awareness has expanded beyond what you used to tolerate unconsciously. None of this is random. Your outer world is responding directly to the internal transformation taking place within you. The universe is revealing externally what needs acknowledgement internally. You may suddenly recognize where you have been abandoning your own needs in order to maintain peace with others. You may realize where you accepted less than your soul deserved, because part of you feared being alone. You may finally see how long you have been carrying connections, ambitions, or emotional attachments that lost their alignment long ago. These realizations can feel deeply confronting because they challenge the stories you once told yourself to maintain emotional comfort. Yet they are also incredibly empowering because once awareness enters a situation, choice becomes possible. You cannot consciously change what you refuse to see. The mirror is not appearing to shame you or criticize you. It is appearing to awaken you. It is showing you the truth clearly enough that denial can no longer survive, allowing you to finally step into a version of yourself that is emotionally conscious, spiritually aligned, and fully aware of your own value. As these revelations continue unfolding, your emotional world may begin moving in waves that feel unpredictable at times. Moments of deep peace may suddenly shift into restlessness. Powerful clarity may be followed by temporary doubt. Emotions you believed you had already healed may return with surprising intensity, leaving you wondering why old feelings are resurfacing again. But this does not mean you are moving backward. It means something buried is finally leaving your system completely. Your inner world is recalibrating itself around deeper truth, processing emotional energy that remained trapped within you for far too long. This is what real transformation feels like while it is actively happening. It is not always graceful, and it is rarely comfortable, but it always carries purpose. Every emotion rising within you now is asking to be acknowledged honestly rather than suppressed again. The sadness wants recognition. The anger wants understanding. The grief wants release. And the more willing you are to feel without resisting or numbing yourself, the more space opens within you for alignment, clarity, healing, and growth. You are not becoming emotionally unstable. You are becoming more connected to your truth than ever before in your life. Then eventually, after enough internal unraveling, a powerful moment begins approaching. There comes a point in every deep transformation where the confusion suddenly starts dissolving. Not because someone explained everything logically, but because something inside you finally knows. The noise quiets. The emotional fog begins lifting. And for the first time in a very long time, you stop searching outside yourself for confirmation, because the truth within you has become undeniable. The shift you have been waiting to understand is not waiting somewhere in the distant future. It is already happening beneath the surface of your awareness, slowly unfolding in ways your mind may not yet fully grasp, but your spirit has already begun responding to. Pluto Retrograde is guiding you toward a moment of undeniable inner certainty, a moment where you stop questioning the signals you have been feeling, stop dismissing the truths rising inside you, and stop pretending not to notice what your soul has been trying to reveal for a very long time. This awakening does not arrive like chaos crashing through your life all at once. It arrives quietly. It arrives through realization, through subtle emotional shifts, through the growing inability to betray your own intuition any longer. And when the clarity finally settles fully into place, it will not feel explosive or theatrical. It will feel calm, grounded, and absolute. You will suddenly understand why certain chapters had to close, why specific people drifted away, why certain connections became emotionally heavy, and why parts of your life that once felt stable slowly began dissolving before your eyes. What once felt confusing will begin making sense from a higher perspective. You will recognize that every collapse carried purpose, every ending carried redirection. Every uncomfortable revelation was guiding you toward deeper alignment with yourself. This is the irreversible turning point where your perspective changes permanently. The moment where illusion no longer controls your perception and truth becomes impossible to ignore. You stop desperately searching outside yourself for answers, validation, or permission, because something inside you has finally awakened with enough strength to guide you forward. And from that awakening emerges a different kind of power, not loud, ego-driven power, but something quieter and far more stable. A grounded inner knowing, a calm emotional strength, a readiness to move into the next phase of your life without needing to force certainty before taking the next step. You are no longer standing where you once stood emotionally, even if part of you still feels caught between worlds. Right now, you are positioned at an energetic threshold, whether you fully recognize it yet or not. This threshold is not visible physically, yet internally it feels unmistakable. It is the crossing point between the old version of your life and the emerging reality attempting to take shape through you. On one side exists the familiar self, built from repeated emotional patterns, old conditioning, and identities shaped through survival. On the other side exists a version of you, connected more deeply to truth, authenticity, and conscious awareness. Standing between these two realities can feel deeply unsettling because transition rarely provides immediate certainty. You may feel disconnected from the person you used to be while still uncertain about the person you are becoming. Old interests may no longer resonate. Old emotional reactions may begin fading. Relationships that once defined you may suddenly feel emotionally distant or misaligned. Yet at the same time, the future version of yourself may still feel incomplete, undefined, or just beyond your ability to fully grasp. This does not mean you are lost. It means transformation is actively happening. Pluto Retrograde is carefully guiding you through this energetic crossing, asking you to trust the emotional truth emerging within you, even before external proof fully appears. There is something deeply powerful about this stage because this is where conscious choice finally enters your life. You are no longer operating entirely through unconscious repetition. You are beginning to see yourself clearly enough to interrupt cycles that once controlled your decisions automatically. And that awareness changes everything, because awareness is the beginning of timeline transformation. Most people do not realize how long they have been living inside invisible emotional timelines. Patterns repeat so consistently that they eventually begin feeling permanent, almost like fate itself. The same disappointments appear wearing different faces. The same emotional wounds replay themselves through different relationships. The same fears shape decisions over and over again until a person forgets they are even participating in a pattern at all. Internal dialogues formed years ago quietly continue shaping reality beneath conscious awareness. Beliefs about worthiness, abandonment, trust, love, success, and fear become energetic scripts that influence choices without ever being questioned. These timelines were never random. They were built slowly through repetition, emotional memory, conditioning, and unconscious belief systems deeply embedded within the subconscious mind. For a very long time, these patterns operated without interruption, reinforcing familiar realities and guiding reactions almost automatically. But something profound is happening now through Pluto Retrograde. These timelines are no longer remaining hidden beneath your awareness. They are beginning to dissolve from the inside outward. What makes this phase so important is not that life is forcing transformation onto you against your will. What makes it powerful is that your consciousness has evolved enough to finally recognize the patterns themselves. You are seeing too much now to remain asleep inside them. You are feeling too deeply now to continue tolerating emotional loops that once felt normal. You are beginning to recognize the repetitive structures that quietly kept you emotionally trapped for years. And once recognition enters a pattern, the pattern starts losing its power automatically. This is why certain situations may suddenly feel more emotionally intense right now, almost as though unresolved themes are returning one final time before disappearing completely. Old emotional triggers may rise unexpectedly. Familiar dynamics may reappear through people, conversations, or situations that resemble the past. For a brief moment, it may even feel like nothing has changed at all. But this is not regression. This is exposure. The old timeline is revealing itself clearly before it collapses. Pluto retrograde is allowing you to witness with complete honesty what you have unconsciously participated in, what emotional compromises you accepted, what cycles you continued recreating without realizing it. Yet now there is one crucial difference separating this moment from your past. This time, you are no longer completely immersed inside the pattern itself. You are observing it consciously. You are seeing it from outside the emotional fog that once controlled your reactions. And that shift in awareness changes everything. Because once a pattern becomes visible, once you can identify it clearly, once you can feel how deeply misaligned it is with the person you are becoming, it can no longer hold the same authority over your life. Awareness breaks attachment. Awareness interrupts repetition. Awareness begins rewriting reality itself. Something begins happening the moment an old timeline loses its hold over your consciousness. The structure that once controlled your emotional reactions, your decisions, and your sense of identity starts weakening from within, almost like a reality that can no longer sustain itself under the weight of your awareness. Pluto retrograde initiates this unraveling quietly, yet the effects become impossible to ignore once you begin seeing your own life with greater clarity. The old emotional patterns that once felt permanent begin breaking apart piece by piece. The loops that kept repeating themselves throughout your relationships, your fears, your choices, and your inner dialogue slowly start losing their authority over you. This is the point where your power begins returning, not through dominance or control over others, but through conscious choice. That is the true shift taking place now. You are no longer operating automatically from old conditioning that was built during survival, fear, or emotional unconsciousness. You are beginning to respond from present awareness instead of reacting from old wounds. And inside that awareness exists the possibility for an entirely different future. The timelines that once dictated your experiences start fading away naturally, not because they were stolen from you, but because your spirit no longer resonates with them. You have evolved beyond the frequency that once sustained those realities. As they dissolve, space begins opening within your life. Space for something new to emerge, something more aligned with your current level of consciousness, your emotional truth, and the authenticity you have been rediscovering within yourself. This transition does not happen all at once. It unfolds gradually. There may still be moments where the past tries pulling you backward into familiar reactions and familiar emotional comforts. Certain people, habits, or patterns may temporarily tempt you, because familiarity often feels safer than transformation. You may feel moments where the old version of your life calls out to you simply because it is known, predictable, and emotionally familiar. But even during those moments, something inside you has fundamentally changed. You cannot return fully to unconscious living once awareness has awakened inside you. You cannot unknow the truths your soul has already recognized. You cannot pretend not to see what has already become visible within your spirit. You are awake inside your own reality now, and that awakening is precisely what interrupts the cycle that once controlled your life without question. The old timelines are not being cruelly removed from you. They are reaching completion. Their purpose has already been fulfilled. The lessons hidden within them have already entered your awareness. The emotional experiences connected to them have already shaped your growth. And because of that, their energy is finally ready to leave your system. As this release deepens, you may begin feeling something unfamiliar, yet strangely liberating at the same time. A sense of openness may begin appearing where emotional heaviness once existed. A feeling of possibility may slowly replace emotional limitation. There may even be moments where you feel freedom emerging inside you before your external reality has fully caught up to the change. At first, this freedom can feel uncomfortable because you are stepping beyond identities and emotional structures that once defined your existence. Yet hidden inside uncertainty is enormous potential. And hidden inside that potential is the beginning of an entirely different chapter of your life. You are no longer trapped inside the emotional repetitions of your past. You are no longer unconsciously recreating experiences that once felt unavoidable. You are stepping into a reality shaped through conscious alignment instead of unconscious survival patterns. This is the true breaking of timelines. The moment where your life stops endlessly repeating the same emotional cycles and finally begins evolving into something new. There comes a stage during transformation when holding on to what no longer aligns becomes more painful than releasing it. The emotional effort required to maintain outdated attachments begins exhausting you in ways deeper than physical tiredness. You may have already started feeling this within yourself recently. Certain environments that once felt comfortable may now leave you emotionally drained. Conversations that once felt natural may suddenly feel forced or heavy. There may be a quiet internal resistance growing toward situations you once tolerated without question. You may notice an unexplainable discomfort in spaces, dynamics, or relationships that once felt emotionally safe. Beneath all of it exists a subtle but undeniable knowing that some chapter in your life has already ended energetically, even if it has not yet disappeared physically. This is the call toward release, and release rarely arrives as a dramatic external demand. More often, it arrives as inner knowing, the realization that something fundamental has shifted within you. And because of that shift, certain attachments can no longer continue existing in the same form they once did. Pluto Retrograde does not randomly remove things from your life without purpose. It illuminates what has already completed its role within your evolution. It reveals the places where you have continued holding on, not because something is truly aligned with your future, but because habit, fear, loneliness, or familiarity made letting go feel difficult. This is where the real challenge begins. The challenge is not seeing the truth. The challenge is honoring it once you finally do. Because letting go is not always about dramatic endings or physical loss. Sometimes it is simply the acknowledgement that something which once supported your growth no longer belongs within the version of yourself now emerging. Growth requires space in order to unfold fully, and space can only appear when you are willing to release what your spirit has already outgrown. Much of this release may happen internally before it becomes visible externally. You may begin detaching emotionally from situations that once consumed your thoughts constantly. You may stop needing validation from people whose approval once defined your sense of worth. You may notice your priorities shifting naturally without forcing them to change. Goals that once seemed important may suddenly lose emotional meaning. Certain pursuits may no longer excite you because your consciousness no longer resonates with the energy they were built upon. None of these shifts are random. They are signs that your frequency is changing. Your inner world is evolving beyond the emotional structures that once defined it, and because your internal alignment is changing, your external reality must eventually reorganize itself to match. There may still be moments where this process feels frightening. Releasing the familiar can create uncertainty because the mind often prefers known pain over unknown transformation. Fear may rise when you realize you are stepping away from identities, patterns, or attachments that once gave you emotional certainty. But what feels unknown now is not empty. It is simply unwritten. And Pluto Retrograde is guiding you toward that unwritten future, one truth at a time. One of the hardest truths to accept during transformation is realizing that holding on to something does not guarantee it will remain part of your future. In many cases, the tighter you cling to what no longer aligns with your spirit, the more you delay the experiences, connections, and opportunities that are actually trying to reach you. Pluto Retrograde brings this realization into sharp focus. It becomes impossible to continue pretending that something still belongs in your life once your soul has already recognized the misalignment. You begin feeling the emotional weight of forcing yourself to remain connected to situations that no longer resonate with the person you are becoming. The exhaustion is not random. It comes from the tension between your evolving truth and the outdated attachments still asking you to remain the same. Every emotional bond, every identity, every pattern that no longer exists in harmony with your inner growth, eventually becomes an energetic barrier standing between you and the reality, trying to emerge through you. Pluto Retrograde does not allow these contradictions to remain hidden forever. It slowly removes the illusion that you can continue carrying what your spirit has already outgrown without consequence. Yet this process is not asking you to force dramatic change or make reckless decisions from emotion alone. This energy operates far more deeply than impulsive action. It asks you to listen carefully to yourself in ways you may never have before. To pay attention to the quiet discomfort that keeps repeating itself inside you. To notice the subtle emotional signals guiding you toward alignment, even when your mind still wants certainty before moving forward. It is about honoring what your inner world already knows, rather than constantly searching for external permission to trust it. And perhaps the most important realization of all is understanding that release is not the same as loss. What leaves your life during this phase is not disappearing into emptiness. It is transforming. When you let go of something your soul has outgrown, you are not destroying meaning. You are creating space for something more aligned to finally enter. That is the deeper power hidden within release. The real transformation does not come from what you leave behind. It comes from what becomes possible once you stop carrying what no longer belongs within your future. Pluto Retrograde reminds you that you are allowed to evolve beyond old versions of yourself. You are allowed to change your emotional landscape. You are allowed to outgrow realities that once felt permanent simply because your consciousness has expanded beyond them. This is not instability, even if it temporarily feels unfamiliar. This is expansion unfolding in real time. And the more you trust this unfolding process, the more you begin realizing that letting go is not the tragic ending the mind fears it to be. More often, it is the quiet beginning of alignment finally entering your life. Amid all the emotional intensity, all the revelations, and all the internal movement that Pluto retrograde creates, there are also moments that feel strangely silent. Moments where everything seems to slow down unexpectedly. The outside world quiets. The emotional turbulence softens temporarily. The endless stream of thoughts loses momentum for a while. At first, these quiet spaces may feel uncomfortable because part of you expects constant movement or immediate answers. You may wonder why clarity has not fully arrived yet. You may question why the solutions you seek still feel slightly beyond reach. Yet these moments of silence are not signs that nothing is happening. They are preparation. They are the sacred spaces where everything you have been emotionally processing finally begins integrating itself within you. Silence reveals truths that noise can never fully uncover. When distractions begin fading and external influences lose their grip over your attention, your inner voice starts becoming louder and clearer. This is where intuition strengthens in powerful ways. This is where understanding deepens without force. Truths that once felt confusing begin settling into certainty naturally, almost as if they were always present, waiting patiently for you to become still enough to recognize them. You may notice that during these quieter moments, realizations arrive without struggle. Insights emerge effortlessly while driving, resting, sitting alone, or simply existing without distraction. The answers do not appear through overthinking. They appear through presence. And when they arrive, they often feel calm rather than dramatic, gentle rather than explosive, yet undeniably true. This is the recalibration of your inner world taking place. Pluto retrograde is not only exposing truth, it is teaching you how to embody it completely, so it becomes part of your identity rather than temporary understanding. But embodiment requires space. It requires moments where you stop chasing certainty outside yourself. It requires periods of stillness, where you are no longer endlessly analyzing, questioning, or forcing clarity before it is ready to settle naturally into your awareness. There is profound intelligence hidden inside this silence. It teaches you how to trust your own inner knowing without demanding constant external confirmation. It teaches you how to feel deeply without needing immediate explanations for every emotional shift. It teaches you how to recognize truth intuitively before physical evidence fully appears. Slowly, your dependence on external validation begins weakening, while your connection to your inner awareness becomes stronger and more stable than ever before. And as this connection deepens, you begin realizing something life-changing. The answers you spent so much time searching for outside yourself were never truly separate from you at all. They were waiting within you the entire time, waiting for enough silence to finally be heard clearly. These quiet phases are not interruptions in your transformation. They are essential parts of it. They are the moments where awareness moves beyond intellectual understanding and becomes lived truth. They are where transformation stops being theory and starts becoming embodiment. And the more willing you are to enter these silent spaces without resistance, the more you discover a strange sense of calm existing beneath all the uncertainty. A clarity begins emerging even before every answer fully reveals itself, because ultimately it is not constant noise, emotional chaos, or endless searching that changes a person most deeply. It is silence. It is the quiet moments where your soul finally has enough space to speak clearly. In these seemingly ordinary moments, everything slowly begins making sense, not because you forced understanding into existence, but because you became present enough to receive it naturally. And as your trust in this silence grows, your awareness begins expanding beyond logic alone. You start accessing a deeper kind of knowing that no longer requires proof in order to feel real. Something inside you becomes sharper during this process, more observant, more emotionally precise, more deeply connected to energetic truth. Your intuition no longer whispers faintly in the background. It begins guiding you with unmistakable clarity. You may notice yourself sensing emotional undercurrents in conversations immediately. You may begin reading energy between words, rather than relying only on what is spoken aloud. Situations that once confused you suddenly become transparent before external confirmation ever arrives. You begin feeling the truth of people and circumstances instinctively, without needing evidence to validate your perception. This is not coincidence, and it is not imagination. This is activation unfolding through Pluto Retrograde. Your awareness is expanding beyond surface-level perception. And once that inner sight fully awakens, you will never experience reality the same way again.